The film kicks off with Bernard Garrett, a black man, standing trial in court. The committee calls him to testify, and as Bernard sits before them, his mind begins to drift back to his early years, reflecting on his history. As a young boy, Bernard worked as a shoe shiner for white customers in Texas. While polishing their shoes, he would quietly listen in on their business conversations, jotting down notes. He also observed the local bankers closely and learned to quickly flee the scene before anyone noticed him. His father reviewed Bernard's notes and recognized his potential. However, he doubted that his son's dreams could ever come to fruition in Texas. Years later, after marrying Eunice, Bernard moved his family into Eunice's uncle's house in Los Angeles. Her uncle, Deacon, considered Bernard's real estate ambitions to be laughable. Bernard, feeling the weight of this dismissal, was eventually forced to leave the family dinner table. But he made a vow to Eunice that he would move her and their son out of the cramped shed they were living in and into Deacon's home. The very next day, Bernard drove Deacon's son, Tony, and had an encounter with his white friend, Matt. Bernard began to pursue his career more seriously by reaching out to different property owners. Eunice suggested that Bernard meet a potential co-investor named Joe, so they both went to see Joe at his lodge. However, Bernard was enraged by the meeting and stormed out, claiming he could never work with such a person. Eunice, equally frustrated, demanded that Bernard either collaborate with Joe or lower Barker's price. Bernard ultimately chose the latter. Bernard then set out to negotiate with Barker, who owned a building Bernard was keen to purchase. However, the price was steep, and Barker outright refused Bernard's offer. Not one to give up easily, Bernard turned to Barker's associate, Mr. Reed, asking for a loan to help secure the building. Later that evening, Bernard received a call from Mr. Barker, who, impressed by Bernard's perseverance, agreed to lend him the money to seal the deal. Through all these struggles and setbacks, Bernard's determination and resourcefulness became more evident, revealing his unwavering commitment to achieving his goals. Bernard and Eunice attended a party, and Joe made an appearance. At the gathering, Bernard and Joe discussed a potential business deal regarding an apartment, though Bernard couldn't hide his anger and discomfort being around Joe. Soon after, Bernard began working on Mr. Barker's apartment, and one day, a woman named Ms. Cooper, who lived in the building, stopped by. Upon seeing black men working there, she was skeptical. When Bernard confidently told her that he now owned the building, she refused to believe it. Matt joined Bernard and the others, and they continued working together. However, after a few hours, the police showed up, following a report Ms. Cooper had made. But when the police found nothing wrong, they left, and the workers continued their tasks without further incident. Impressed by Bernard's initiative, Mr. Barker eventually decided to make him his business partner. This partnership brought about positive changes for Bernard. He moved his family into a beautiful apartment, the first of many steps towards the comfortable life he had always dreamed of. Sadly, Mr. Barker passed away, and his wife took over his properties. However, she wasn't as favorable toward Bernard, reducing his profits significantly. Realizing that he needed another way forward, Bernard saw Joe as his last hope and turned to him for support. Together, Bernard and Joe made the bold decision to buy the Mainland Land Bank by indirectly purchasing the bank. They recognized that they needed someone to represent them and saw Matt as the ideal candidate. They began training Matt, teaching him the ins and outs of real estate, how to navigate high society, how to play golf, and even how to enjoy fine dining. They also taught him essential business calculations, and within a month, Matt had become incredibly skilled in every aspect of their work. Once Matt was fully prepared, Bernard and Joe sent him out on his first business mission, which involved meeting Charles Renaud. During their time together, Matt played a spectacular round of golf with Charles, using the game as an opportunity to catch his attention. As Bernard and Joe continued to mentor Matt, they had already mapped out every possible way Charles Renaud could approach the business negotiations. Matt made sure he had every calculation memorized, ensuring that he appeared highly professional. His preparation paid off when he met Charles Renaud and successfully navigated the negotiations. In the end, Matt secured the business deal after Charles Renaud selected the option that Matt had presented. The good life began to unfold for Bernard, Joe, and Matt. Bernard worked diligently, making sure everything fell into place. Meanwhile, Matt's life flourished, and he eventually married Susie. But Bernard's ambitions didn't stop there. He made the decision to purchase a bank in Texas, understanding that it could serve the Black community living there. However, Bernard and Joe had initially planned to continue managing the bank they already owned in Los Angeles, but Bernard remained adamant about pursuing the bank in Texas. After some persuasion, Joe eventually joined him. Together, they embarked on their mission to acquire the Texas bank, where they met Robert Florence Jr. and the other committee members. Matt successfully infiltrated the bank, although Robert Florence grew suspicious of him. Despite this, Bernard managed to change the bank's policy regarding loans to Black people, securing better loans for the community and helping local businesses thrive. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until Robert Florence uncovered Bernard and Joe's involvement in the bank. Florence then attempted to blackmail them, threatening to expose their operation. Meanwhile, Susie urged Matt to ask Bernard and Joe to buy a second bank in Texas with the intention of running it herself. Although Bernard and Joe were not initially supportive of this idea, Matt secretly worked behind their backs to secure a loan using their investments. This move soon caused problems in the business. To protect his interests and keep an eye on Matt, Bernard reluctantly took on the role of cleaning ups in his own bank, remaining close to Matt in case he needed assistance. The situation took a darker turn when the examiner from the office of the comptroller of the currency visited the bank. He explained to Matt how the bank had violated the rules. Under pressure, Matt eventually confessed that he had brought Robert Florence into the business, leading to Florence's involvement in setting them up. Joe eventually discovered that Matt had used the mainland bank in Texas to fund the second bank, without their knowledge. Furious, they rushed to confront Matt, hoping to fix the situation. However, before they could resolve anything, the deputy comptroller of the currency arrived with his team and fired Matt. In the aftermath, Bernard and Joe tried to figure out how to extricate themselves from the mess. Senator McClellan, sensing the gravity of the situation, advised Matt to do whatever he could to avoid prison. When Matt went to court, he testified against Bernard and Joe, turning on them to save himself. Senator McClellan offered Bernard a deal: take immunity or defend the rights of Black people and face prison time. Bernard, however, made the bold decision to defend the equality of his people, despite the consequences. In the end, Bernard and Joe faced 3 years in prison, with the government seizing everything they had worked for. In a poignant moment, Bernard shared with Eunice how Matt had helped them purchase a house in the Bahamas, providing a glimpse of hope for the future. The film concluded with Bernard and Eunice driving away, free at last, symbolizing the unwavering fight for justice and equality despite the personal sacrifices they had made.